Video 1 dealt primarily with timekeeping from a straight-ahead point of view. In this volume, we're going to explore some different rhythmic possibilities and some alternative beats. We know that rhythm is the essence of drumming, but it's important to think melodically and harmonically too. In this solo, inspired by the music of New Orleans, I establish a groove on the kit while playing the melody on the snare drum. When playing or talking about straight eighth note music, that is like funk or pop kind of stuff, I still consider the quarter note the most important part of the beat. But it's the subdivisions that make the music sound the way that it does. And I have to be aware of the smallest common denominator of those subdivisions to have a strong internal reference point that I can hook everything up to. For example, when I play this kind of a groove, it's what most people would consider an eighth note groove. But what I'm singing to myself are 16th notes. Why? Well, because the bass drum is playing 16th notes, and my smallest common denominator being the 16th note, if I'm singing that, then whenever I play the bass drum or add that rhythm anywhere, a 16th note rhythm, I'm not flying it in out of the blue. I've got a reference point, and it's like a clock, a wheel that's in motion, and I can latch onto it, and everything will fall right where I'm going to hope it will. So by being aware and singing those subdivisions to myself, I can play a real steady and solid beat from the get-go. But when I play these subdivisions, for example, eighth notes on the hi-hat, just like when I'm playing a jazz ride cymbal pattern, the quarter note arm motion really doesn't change. Those are quarter notes. Now I'll play eighth notes. Now I could play very strict even eighth notes if I had to. But somehow I prefer the other way. It has a lilt to it, a little bit of a swing, and maybe that's why I'm not called to do more pop record dates, but that's okay, I like it like that. The key to any beat's success is being able to play it simply and to play it well. Now, the first time that you meet any piece of music, whether in a recording session situation or playing with a band for the first time or playing just a piece of music with a band that you're already in, you want to shake music's hand, look it right in the eye and say, "How are you?" and then wait for a reply. I think if you add too much of yourself to it the first time through, you're really not getting a chance to hear what it is you got to do. For example, you go into a studio and you got a piece of music in front of you and it says funk beat. And I'm talking about a general kind of recording situation, some kind of commercial thing. I don't think it'd be a good idea to approach it like this. 1, 2, 3. So on and so forth. You know, if it's a jingle and they're trying to sell cornflakes, no one's really going to understand what it is you're trying to do. You got to listen and hear what's going on. I listen to the bass player first. The bass player's pattern will usually guide your hands and feet as to what to play. And when in doubt, make it simple, find out what's going on. Here's the way you'd want to try to approach a jingle session. If it's 4/4 and it says funk, then do this. 1, 2, 3. I think it's a good thing to have enough confidence in yourself to play simply. You know, you don't have to show off. Play something simple and well, and you prepare the music for greater things to come. And you have some place to go. You know, something that is complex and busy and amazing all the time, it's kind of like bad wallpaper after a while. So, start simple. The music will start to tell you the things that you can do. For example, listening to the other members of the rhythm section, particularly the bass player, can guide you as to what your hands and feet should play. But to put the drummer back in the driver's seat, let me show you some examples of different kinds of rhythms accompanied by a common bass line. 1, 2, 3. Now I'd like to demonstrate 3 different approaches to the same song. One pretty much straight ahead 4/4 type of approach. The next one a little simpler and more open. And the third approach definitely more open and more interactive and responsive to the other players. Then we'll do a complete version of the tune utilizing all 3 kinds of concepts. We'll definitely be concentrating on the latter 2 styles.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4. One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
course, it's always important to listen really well to the other musicians that you're playing with. We'd like to do a piece now where that's extremely important and particularly evident. It's a composition of mine entitled In Walked Maya. I wrote it for my baby girl. And the piece moves along, well, I approach it trying to get more of this mood of motion and velocity as opposed to creating a steady pulse. Some music can flourish under a less rigid rhythmic framework. A piece like that is free, but it's controlled. Controlled to the extent that the mood and the emotion of the piece is respected. Doggish, 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 doggish. I've learned to play all the music that I play by listening. And when I was young, my father used to buy me a lot of different recordings, a lot of field recordings done in Africa, and recordings of Art Blakey playing with like an Afro-American drum ensemble. And he got me one recording that was really terrific and had a very big influence in my life, and that was the soundtrack to a film called Black Orpheus. And I didn't see the film until recently. It's a marvelous film. The music is tremendous, and I certainly recommend you watching it. You really get the spirit of the Brazilian people, their music, carnival. Just hearing them speak the Portuguese language, I think gives you a good idea of how their rhythm flows the way it does. Brazilians think of samba in two. And I try to get that same feeling of feeling it into whether the tune's counted off from 4/4 or whether we're playing authentic samba. Now the question of authenticity. I try to respect the feeling and the mood and where the music is coming from and listen to it. But I'm not so religious about, playing it authentically. I think jazz has kind of always done things that way. And as long as you get the spirit of the music, I think you can adapt it to be your own. And in fact, that's what I do with all kinds of music. And pick up a little bit here, a little bit there, put it all together. It'll sound like me, and the same thing for you. So I'd like to demonstrate a lot of different kinds of ethnic rhythms. I think a good place to start would be from Brazil, thinking into what I started this section playing was just a little personal version of samba. The floor tom was acting like the surdo. The surdo is the Brazilian bass drum, and it's played like this. And more when I play samba, I enjoy using the floor tom-tom in that kind of manner. 1, 2, Now the bass drum is playing on beats 1 and 2, and I'm accenting a little bit on beat 2. But just a little bit. I don't go really nuts worrying about it too much. As long as I'm thinking it and feeling it, I think it will come out. Generally, the kind of motor that I will play down in the feet for Brazilian music is more of the like bossa nova rhythm. Now that was really, I guess, the first Brazilian kind of music that I ever played. Black Orpheus came out in 1959 or so, and I listened to the soundtrack recording when I was quite young. Bossa nova hit the U.S. shores in the early 60s, and if you played the drums, you wound up playing The Girl from Ipanema. 1, 2, 1, 2. so forth. Samba is not too different from that. If we play this kind of a motor, the samba rhythm, instead of the bossa nova clave-like pattern, would be something like this. So I think with samba you can play your bass drum either on just 1, 2, 1, 2. Or the bossa nova kind of pattern. I kind of go back and forth sometimes between bossa nova and samba. I've had the great pleasure to work with a Brazilian pianist named Ileane Elias, and playing with her. Also, when I worked with Tanya Maria, both these women have wonderful left hands on the piano, and they do a lot of the work for the drummer. But just by playing with them and listening to the way they play, I've really gotten a feeling for the kind of phrasing that makes this music swing in its own way and to really come alive. Now, remember, music is not notes on paper. The way we make the music swing, the way we make it breathe, is by using dynamics and by phrasing. In other words, that's pretty two-dimensional sounding. Let's bring it to life. 1, 2, 1. I'm using dynamics, I'm playing softer and louder, getting textural changes. Remember, dynamics are so important to a drummer. And if you're the kind of drummer that thinks that, dynamics means... Dynamics? What are you talking about dynamics? I'm playing as loud as I can. Well, if you think that's all dynamics are about, then you need to stop and reconsider. short little solo there, I started off with my little interpretation of samba. And then I went up to the ride cymbal and played some ride cymbal variations for samba while I added a halftime backbeat. Halftime backbeat is nice, kind of opens up the music. You start getting different layers or levels of time going on. And the ride cymbal can participate in that. In other words, I started playing like half notes on the bell of the ride cymbal. And this opens up the beat a lot, and it provides a very clear, rhythmic signpost for the whole band. I then switched over to a variation of the Brazilian rhythm, the baião. And the baião is great. It's a groovy rhythm at a medium tempo. It's real useful for fast tempos because there are less bass drum beats per bar. In other words, if you're doing the samba or Brazilian type of bass drum pattern in a real fast tempo, it gets kind of busy sounding. I could try an even faster tempo, and you might get an idea how busy it can really sound. Let's see. Okay, so there's a lot of ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. When I was working with Jaco Pastorius a few years ago, when he had a small group, we were going to play Invitation that evening. It's the first night of the band, and I realized as we started running it down that it wasn't going to be a 4/4 bebop version of the tune. Jaco wasn't walking, he was playing a great rhythmic line, pretty angular, and I knew that a bass drum would anchor the rhythm really well, but a samba pattern seemed too busy. So I borrowed the beat that I've heard Airto play so well on a lot of recordings, the Brazilian baião, and tried it at this fast tempo. It seemed to be more open, and it lets the music breathe. So that's a nice way to play a real up-tempo, and you really don't have to break your neck. Very rhythmic, yet not too busy. One thing I want to point out about that pattern is that I'm accenting on the second beat of that bass drum pattern in each bar. 1, 2, 1, 2. My first professional gig, big time gig anyway, was with the Stan Kenton Orchestra. I just turned 18 years old, and I joined Stan's band, and along with everything else I'd been listening to when I was young, I listened to a lot of Stan Kenton recordings, and Stan did a fair amount of Latin or Afro-Cuban music. And that called for a beat that was pretty much just a double-time Latin, kind of a mambo rhythm, a generic double-time Latin beat that would work well in his band. It works well in show music. It goes something like this. Very basic pattern on the bass drum and hi-hat. Left hand is playing on the snare drum with the cross stick and the tom-tom. The right hand is playing the bell pattern on the bell of the cymbal. Now, an important thing to remember when you play these kinds of patterns, if any part of the kit is representing, let's say, like an instrument that would be in a salsa band or something, for example, the bell of the cymbal playing a cowbell pattern, you should play a pattern, in other words, a complete pattern that would sound good as if it were played on another instrument. If you approached it in a linear style where you're kind of passing the ball from one part of the kit to the other, it might not sound so good. In other words, I've heard a lot of the drummers play this kind of a beat like this. And it's I don't know, there's something about it that almost gives me indigestion. It's an incomplete pattern. It's kind of like getting to the edge of the sidewalk, and instead of having your next step, you kind of jump off with both feet, land, and start all over again. It doesn't really flow. So I tried to play a complete pattern on any part of the kit, be it the bell, the cymbal, playing the clave with the rim shot. So you create a flow, and I think that gives you more the feeling of a Latin rhythm section, because sometimes it's going to be just you trying to cover all those parts. So on different jazz recordings when I was young, that was the first kind of Latin beat that I ever really heard, and it was the first one that I played. I then got hip to Elvin Jones, and the way Elvin played the Latin beat was more open, and it sounded something like this. More open and more syncopated. I was going to say more sophisticated, but that's a good choice of words too. Anyway, when I got on the road with Stan Kenton's band and we were doing a lot of these double-time Latin numbers, I decided pretty quickly that it would be hip to throw in a little bit of this Elvin influence into this kind of full-bore Latin groove that the band was playing. So it sounded something like this. The orchestration of a beat allows you to change the texture and the mood of a piece of music. Now, a backbeat, certainly our first thought will be to play it on the snare drum. But a backbeat is also very effective when you play it on a floor tom-tom, and it's quite effective when you play it on the bass drum. Now, the first time I ever heard the bass drum played on the backbeat was a recording by Roberta Flack, Killing Me Softly with his song. I'm not sure who the drummer was on that recording, but one drummer that I think of often when I think of this beat, the bass drum on the backbeat, is Steve Gadd. And he's used the beat very effectively, and I've enjoyed using it often myself. So instead of this, we have this. 1, 2, 3. This works on a medium tempo like that. It works really nice on ballads, slow tempos. And the tune doesn't have to be a reggae tune in order for you to use that beat. Now, it's quite typical in a lot of reggae music to play the bass drum on the offbeat or on the backbeat. Now, I guess I was thinking a little bit about reggae when I started playing a tune with the group Steps, which later became known as Steps Ahead, a composition that Don Grolnick wrote entitled Pools. And it's one beat I'd like to play for you because it's popular with a lot of musicians. 1, 2, 1, 2. This idea works really well on softer tunes or on gentler kinds of compositions, for example, ballads. You can do something like this. 1, 2, 3. Demonstrating this idea of orchestrating the beat around the drum kit and doing our jazz version of reggae, we'd now like to play a Mark Johnson tune. This is something called Mojo Highway.